Hi YouTube, I'm ABC coming at you with another development video for our Unheralded game. Today I'm going to talk to you a little about the physics system that I've been working on. So to start off, I'm going to tell you some basic physics stuff so you can understand how this works a little more. So I'm going to make what we call a flow diagram. So you draw a flat surface, and then I'm going to draw a box on top of it. So in physics, everything moves because they're being influenced by a force. And force you write as arrows like that. That would be a force in that direction, and the bigger the arrow, the greater the force. That's a bigger force, roughly twice as much as that one, well, a little less than twice as much. So we look at all the forces that affect objects, and this box will be our object in this case. So let's see. Let's think about what forces are affecting it. If it's just still, then we have, let's see, gravity's pulling down on it, so that's force of gravity, and then obviously it's not going through the ground, so that means that there must be a force that's acting against it, because I believe it's Newton's third law. For every force there's an equal and opposite force, if it's still at least. So therefore we say there's a what we call normal force pushing back up from the ground that's affecting the gravity. So if from our game we have that force push move, so that could be considered another force that's pushing it that way. If the push is coming from that way, that would be moving the force that way. So that's supposed to be the push force, I guess you could say. And because it's moving that way, then we could also say there's friction going this direction. So friction. And if you learn more about physics, you'll see that this quickly can become very complicated if it's in the air, or anytime there's air resistance that could be taken into account. Oftentimes there's multiple things pulling on it. And your job is to, and also sometimes the force will be at angles like that, and then you need to figure out how to add these up, because it's in 2 dimensions, which makes things tricky. So you can't simply add them. So you have to oftentimes use a lot of trig and that kind of stuff to figure out how to add them up. So that's the basis of physics, really, learning how that forces influence each other. So this is the way that the physics engine works, really, is you decide what your forces are, and at every step you apply those forces. So that's my job as a programmer, to figure out how to take into account all these forces and apply them. So the way I do that is I go in the player and I decide what forces are acting on it. Well, let's say this is the player. So I go in the player and I decide what forces are acting on it, and then after that I go into a script, and that script will apply some forces that are always constant, like gravity, or the normal force if it's attached, or normal force if it's colliding with something, or the friction and that kind of stuff. And then that will add that, I guess, to the stuff that I'm applying to the object, and then it'll figure out what the overall speed in the x and y directions will be, and then that script will modify accordingly. Hopefully it'll make more sense to you once I show it to you in the game. But now let me show you some problems I've been coming across. Let's say, let me find a razor tool. Let's say I have the same situation. I have a box, but it's on a slope like that. So I have a box like that, and then I have gravity going downwards, and let's see. So the gravity will be pulling it this way, so therefore the friction will be going like that. In physics, they often call friction the screw you force, because it's always going against the direction you're going. That's a fun fact right there. And then we would have a normal force going up like that, going against the wall. So in this case, the overall, let me change colors for overall. Let's say red will be overall. The overall will be going somewhere in this direction, because gravity is pulling in that direction. Unless friction is high enough to counter gravity, but usually it isn't. Well, I guess it depends. So this can be tricky, because oftentimes I'll have the player hitting against this thing, and then I tell the player to go that way. And to find out exactly with what force goes that way, it actually depends on, it's not going to be exactly the same color, but it depends on the angle of the slope, theta. So this is fine, I just need to know the angle of the slope, and then I can figure this out. But the thing is, we want there to be nice smooth slopes like that. So if I have it right there, I can't really find the angle of that slope. I would have to use calculus to find the tangent line and then figure it out from there, but I don't have that luxury. I think in actual games they use a limit to figure out to take the slopes at smaller and smaller areas, and then that way they find the slope at that point. But again, I don't really have luxury of doing that, so it's just too complicated. So the way they one thing you can actually do is, let's say, so here we have our slope, and then in order to give the player a precise angle, I'll draw this in yellow. I can have like a hitbox with a bunch of straight lines like that. So I can say if it hits at around that point, then it'll be the slope of that particular section. That's probably hard to see. Let me see if I can help you out there. Yeah, it depends on if the player hits here. It depends on the slope of that particular section. So by making a collision box like that, I can figure out the exact slopes I want the player to be working with. So let's see, that's one thing. Okay, so that's the solution to that, but that's really tricky. I'm not exactly sure how I'd figure that out. So that's problem 1 that I'm having. Problem 2, I really hope this comes out coherent. So slopes is problem 1. Problem 2, if I have two objects colliding with each other, ground, box 1, box 2. Okay, if I have two objects colliding with each other, how do I decide which direction it goes? Well, this brings into account elastic collisions and inelastic collisions and everything in between. Elastic collisions is where they bounce off each other. If you're playing pool, they're almost always elastic collisions where basically there's almost no energy loss and they just bounce off each other. And so that's one. Elastic is where they basically bounce off each other, and inelastic is where they lose a bunch of energy and they basically stick together and combine. And let's see, if you're thinking of two trains that are slamming to each other, they will not just simply bounce off each other. They will probably stick together because it's an inelastic collision. Now, it's impossible for something to be perfectly elastic or perfectly inelastic. Usually it's something in between. So that's why I'm sort of having a little bit of problems. So, example of this is, I remember my demo, I had the player over here, and then I had two boxes right here. And I hit the box and they just flew in directions looking nice. So the problem was that, so just like that doesn't seem too bad, but if I added more boxes like that, then it became a problem because I had a program for elastic collisions. So the blast would hit this block down here. All the energy from that block would hit into that one, and all the energy from that one would hit into that one. If you ever seen one of those swing contraptions like that, I don't know if you guys have seen this before, but like you drop that one, it hits right here, and then it'll push that block out. For a force push, if the force of this block represents a force push, I want to blast those things away. So it's not a perfectly elastic collision. So in this case, it'll hit this block down here, and then it'll transfer all of the energy over to these blocks on the outside. So you'll see it hit here, then these two will fly up, that one will fly diagonally, and these two will fly that way, which doesn't make any sense. Okay, that's problem 2, collisions, particularly with my force push thing, because I still don't know exactly how the physics should work with that. Okay, eraser. No, that's not the eraser. Okay, there we go, eraser. Okay, so that's problem 1 and 2. Problem 1 was angles. Problem 2 is how to get the collisions to work. How to figure out how much energy needs to be lost without making perfectly, without having it being perfectly elastic and all that. So, but now on problem 3. Let's say I had a that's not a staircase. There we go. Let's say I have a staircase like that, and I have a block that's looks something like that. Okay. So, if this was the real world, it would fall down and it would start rotating because this corner would hold that corner of the block upwards, and then it would start rotating. So, that's what would happen in the real world. But with my physics engine, it will check if anything's under the block, and it'll notice something's under there, and then the normal force of this little corner will cancel out gravity, and then it'll stop there. So, in other words, my engine does not take into account rotation. That is a problem. So I was basically at a standstill here. I learned some equations dealing with rotation from physics, but I didn't exactly know how to make certain points affect it. Like for instance, if the block was more like that, it would stay on there. So how do I decide where the tipping point is? So the rotational stuff was also quite a headache, and then if it's irregular, like I don't know, something like that is even worse. I have no idea how to get that to work. So that was problem 3, rotation. So I had 3 major problems that were holding me back. How do I get angles to work? How to get collisions to work when they're not perfectly elastic? And how do I get rotation to work? And these are big issues with my engine. So yeah, those are the issues I wanted to identify. Hopefully you understand what the problems are for me. Okay, so moving right along, I'm going to show you some code. Let us find my GameMaker thing. Here I have the old game that I showcased to you in my previous video. Okay, bingo. Here I have the old engine that I showcased to you in my previous video. So one of the main differences between this and what I normally do is that I have variable acceleration or variable force. So the force depends on what all I'm doing to it, whether it's in the air, whether it's on the ground, whether I am trying to run. I don't know. There's a lot of things that can affect the different forces I apply. But so therefore, you see, I have HXL over here, which represents horizontal acceleration, and VXL, which represents vertical acceleration. And then this here is all my code to handle the horizontal acceleration. In my tutorials, I do this in 2 lines, but since I have taken into account so many different situations, it takes quite a bit longer. Like here, I say if it's coming from a standstill, have a higher acceleration. If you're just moving, have a slower acceleration. That way, you'll go decently fast when you start, but then you slow down, speed up only a little bit after that. And this is assuming you're on the floor. So if you're not on the floor, you want to have quite a small acceleration. And then this is repetitive. I clean that up later. And then I have similar logic for vertical motion. And then here I decide whether I'm colliding with a block and all that. And then I have the script perform physics, which figures out gravity and friction and all that. So I have that, which is even longer. Oh well, I guess it's about the same. Anyway, this is like a big mess of code as well. And as I showed you earlier, despite all of this code, it's still subpar compared to what it could be. So for that reason, I decided to use GameMaker Studio, which is quite a nice program. It's expensive. I wouldn't get it if you're not serious about it. But lucky for me, I decided to get oh gosh, okay, there we go. Lucky for me, I decided to get GameMaker HTML5, and if you have GameMaker HTML5, then you get Studio for free because they're discontinuing HTML5 and they want to give you some credit for paying the money beforehand. Okay, so here's the player. Here's my code in SubEvent. As you see, this looks very similar to the code I had earlier. If I press the left to right key, it will calculate the acceleration depending on different variables. Nice thing about this program is that it has a built-in physics engine. So I don't have a separate script to calculate all the physics. The engine calculates that all for me, so it works really nicely. And yeah, I remember when I was talking about my problem with angles, I need to calculate what direction the player needs to move depending on the angle of a surface. Well, this takes care of all that. Like as you can see, for the player, I've given it a box, collision box. And for all of my objects, I just make the boxes on my own, and then it'll use that to calculate collisions. It's very nice. One of the problems with learning the new physics engine is that you have to relearn a bunch of variables. So as you can see here, that says phi linear velocity x. That replaced h speed. I was using h speed my entire career, I guess, and now it's phi linear velocity x. And also, the units have changed. The phi linear velocity x is in pixels per second. Previously, HSpeed is in pixels per step. So things are about 30 times bigger than you expect them to be. So here I have my maximum velocities at 200, which is insane by the old standard, but if you put it in pixels per second, that's not too insane. Okay, so without any further ado, let's test this out. Alright, so I basically redone everything. I can move now. Acceleration works fine. I can jump, working fine. So I've pretty much completely ported this over to Game Studio. I have ladders working okay. And as you can see, accelerate in between, which I thought was pretty nifty. So then I can walk here, and so on and so on. So the force push looks about, this is the main thing that's different. I have the force push in there, and look at that. Look how pretty that is. I didn't have that collision momentum problem, and I saw they rotated, which is really cool. So that's that, and that was basically with no effort on my part. It was all taken care of by the engine, which is really neat. And next thing, slopes. I showed you earlier I can assign different shapes to the individual objects. Well, I can do that with slopes too, but the problem is the Box 2D engine, it does not allow for concave polygons. So if you don't know what a concave polygon is, I'll draw it real quick. If you don't know what a concave polygon is, I'm going to show you. Okay, so concave is when there are two adjacent points, or two points that you can draw a line between without it being inside the shape. So, example of a convex polygon is like this, a hexagon. I guess that'll work. So I have several points in the hexagon. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if I draw lines between the points, pretend I'm capable of drawing lines. If I draw straight lines between the points, they will never ever ever be outside of it. An example of a concave one is where they can be outside of it, like that. So here we have our points, and you can draw a lot of them inside, but that one right there is outside, making it concave. Alright, so like you'll see, if I try to make a concave polygon like that would be concave, it'll say not a convex shape, please adjust points. So for slopes, that is concave, therefore I need to figure out something creative for it. One thing that I noticed is that you can assign multiple shapes to objects with code. So okay. So if I press M, I can see the collision boxes of the individual things, which is really nice. And oh, by the way, I programmed the M in, so if you buy GameMaker Studio and try to press M, it won't work for you without doing some extra stuff. So I can add multiple boxes to objects. So as you see for this slope right now, I have 2. So I just need to add more of them, and it'll look really nice. I'm currently working on a Java program where you can easily add new boxes to new polygons to the slope. Alright, so that's that. I'm sorry if this tutorial seemed a little bit unorganized, because it was. I don't have a big time slot to record this, so I basically took all of 5 minutes trying to figure out what I wanted to say. But hopefully you learned a little bit from it, and hopefully you feel like you've been educated in the current progress in our development project. And also, hopefully I don't have to re-record this, because I don't like re-recording stuff. So have a nice day, guys. I will see you guys in the future.